Yolanda, did any of you bring your moms here today? Come on. This work is dedicated to you. We don't know what the new financially feasible, socially conscious, hybrid business models will actually look like. We just know that we need them. How will it happen? I don't know. Use your imaginations. Use your imagination, my mother would say, whenever I complained that I was bored or when I was just generally being a pest as a child. This or go, play outside, read a book, get out of my hair, were frequent refrains from our mother, who with 5 children and plenty to do, needed some breathing room or a single moment to herself. So this is exactly what I'm going to ask all of you to do with me today. Use your imagination. One of the places that I most got to use my imagination as a child was at my mother's laundry line. As children, we would play at the wash line for hours on end, using whatever was hanging on the line. We made tents out of sheets and imagined that we were camping in the desert. We wove in and out through the hanging laundry, and we imagined ourselves in all sorts of magic places, forests or cornfields. We would spin on the pole that anchored the lines until we were dizzy. There was always something hanging on the line. Really, it was some job keeping everyone happy. More than laundry, it was an art form. The best way I know to really kickstart my imagination is through the Alice in Wonderland kind of portal of a really good metaphor. Well, wash is that metaphor for me. It shaped itself around laundry. I need to do my laundry, bring up the wash, hang the wash. Where does all this laundry come from? Didn't I do 5 louds just the other day? And more ironing? Ugh, it never ends. Non si finisce mai in questa casa. Cominga vai. I never knew what that meant. I still don't today. Okay. I come from a long line of washerwomen. And so do you. All of you do too. Think about it. Women have been down at the riverbanks and in our backyards, washing our clothes and sharing our lives and creating community across the millennia since the beginning of time. For me, wash is this kind of oral history of time strung out over a laundry line and a very, very rich metaphor. You see, my mother didn't believe in church. She just believed in hanging laundry. This was really true. And in our home, the laundry line was this central hub, a spiritual sanctuary of sorts, where we gathered as children in this kind of gentle outdoor holding space, this very comfortable and loving place where we connected in and out of our mother's good grace and her conversations with the neighbors. These women who, intentionally or not, seem to synchronize their daily wash cycles so that they just happen to find each other across the fence line, Rupert, at exactly the same moment, almost every day. Just so they could talk, because they knew that talk is therapeutic, and this was their therapy. Now, women talking in this way has often been trivialized as gossip, but that couldn't be further from the truth. There was a lot of mutual support, figuring things out, and affiliation and philosophy that took place. And there are mantras, too, that are connected to wash. Things like, this too shall pass. You make your bed, you lie in it. Young lady, come down here and clean your room. Don't worry, darling. You do the right thing and everything will come out in the wash. I could go on and on. These are beautiful mantras. I learned so many lessons at my mother's wash line that were rooted in her philosophy of life, and I am sure that many of you have also, right? You have your own memories, and I hope they will surface and come front of mind to you today. There is a rhythm, too, a Tai Chi, Qigong, bend and stretch kinesthetic involved here, and it soothes. This is breath work, poetry in motion, a Christo ballet of sorts. Now, when I see a clothesline with the wash hung out, there is an entire gestalt that just envelops me, and I tell you, it can be overwhelming. This metaphor has worked its way so deeply into my psyche, because metaphors take down barriers, they bypass defenses, they're right-brain friendly and dissolve away many of the sometimes helpful but nonetheless constructed boundaries that constrain rather than engage our imagination. These carved out categories that might help us manage our work and our lives can fall rather gently by the wayside, and that is good sometimes. The other things that metaphors allow us to do is to operate in the realm of instinct and intuition, and they don't respect the rules. Sometimes that's necessary. They create entire mindscapes and travel across precise domains, allowing us to cross-fertilize those domains in rich ways as the boundaries of ideas and concepts of time, the time-space continuum, evaporates or collapses entirely. This is the Alice in Wonderland quality of metaphors. So this early, very playful, very sensual, sacred experience that we had as children at our mother's clothesline has now worked its way into this multi-layered work that is performatory in nature. For the last 15 years, the metaphor that is wash has functioned as a moving, morphing, perpetually emergent and conscious-altering meditation in my life. And this meditation by now has evolved into a mosaic or tapestry of work that includes a number of washerwomen monologues and a beautiful collaboration with the poet Amber Past, who is now working on a handmade book that is built out in an altar and opens into a wash line and a dedicatorios to the washerwomen. The collaboration itself and the conversations it has engendered are a beautiful and pure illustration of what is best described as a delicate Chinese box nested story quality of the work. One by one, these women will be weaving and recalling a nearly lost history of the Mayan and of a people who think and speak in verse. People often write to me, or they call me, by now it's almost a daily thing. They say, Maria, I had the most amazing wash experience, and they have to share it. And this language and the metaphor have seeded a kind of collective consciousness, an authentic mirrored recognition and shared grok sense of knowing. Now, I don't want to romanticize the wash line, because there are many, many beautiful ethereal images and all sorts of great sensory experience. Fresh cut air, cut grass, crisp cotton, wet rain, these are all connected to the work. And at the end of the day, though, wash is also about the grit of life. It's about dirt, too. It's about big life notions involving obsolescence and reemergence, personal renewal, and how we are wired to care for each other, to seek order out of chaos, no matter how hopeless the moment may be. Everyone has a story about wash, and I want to be really, really clear that although this work is seen and has emerged through a woman's lens, it is a universal metaphor that is as equally powerful to men. And very often when I present a monologue or share a voice, one of the washerwomen's stories usually have a sharing right after, and the very first people who speak up are the men. And they close any gender gap that might be presumed in this work and share extraordinary stories about wash and their mothers and doing laundry, these kind of formative experiences. But that is the power of a good metaphor. It's not gender specific. Some of the stories are really tough. Images run a broad spectrum from the playful backyard snapshots I've just described to some very difficult experiences, words that should be washed, scrubbed away with yellow soap, for instance, and the barbed wire wash lines, laundry lines of displacement camps and refugee camps. And here, more especially, the wash lines are omnipresent, bearing witness to what is unmentionable, unfathomable, as people seek to create some semblance of order and hold on to any thread of hope in their lives. Now, there is something inherently optimistic in doing wash, because you have to believe that there's a need for fresh clothes. In fact, a belief in tomorrow is embedded in clean laundry. There is a day in, day out, persistent rinascimento sense of optimism that pervades the work. Life is renewable. Life finds its way. Just keep on going. Get that load of laundry out. I believe that there's something in our DNA that calls us to the wash line and to this great, big, beautiful, uninterrupted umbilical cord drift of conversation that is the lifeblood of our species and functions also as a parallel history to all that is written. In this view of life, we are less containers or intact, hardwired personalities than we are channels or conduits for the conversation. This much more fluid ontology emphasizes how our brains are socially structured and how, as humans, we in effect dwell in language, we be in language. Okay, so how do we take the lessons from the wash line, a proven success model for working together for the workplace if we've ever seen one, and link them to the 21st century world of work and the need for a different model of leadership, one that is more inclusive, facilitative, imaginative, and empathetic. We've been through a tough year and it's not over yet. The way it's going to be solved is in the conversations. So the good news is that the conversations are changing and we are open to exploring different options. The bad news is, though, that a lot of people are panicked and far too many have lost their livelihoods. And yes, while necessity is the mother of invention, panic tends to shut down our brain power as the amygdala takes over, and this can be painful. Conversations are therapeutic, though. They're curative. Healing occurs through the conversation, and in addition to being the conduit to innovation, idea sharing, knowledge creation, and brilliance, talking is good for us. It helps us manage through stress and lowers our blood pressure and does all sorts of good things for the heart. This means that health can start anywhere. If you start to use the mirror neurons that trigger the conversation and allow us to join together in things that have meaning for us. And because conversations are opportunistic, in the right environment and with the right support, the right words can ricochet and build on themselves very quickly. And in this way, conversation is the cure. You can just ask any family therapist. They know. That's the work they do. So how can we use the lessons from the wash line to tap into this nether load of conversation that's coded in our DNA? What are the qualities of these conversations as living systems? Qualities of all living systems are simple and gorgeous, really. They're interdependent, meaning that they're relational. They're full of diversity. We're not talking amorphous muck here. The richness comes from all the difference. And they self-organize, they evolve of their own accord. They grow and learn constantly. When living conversations take on a life of their own, we say they go viral, and the best example of a living conversation that's gone viral is democracy. This has implications because if conversations are alive, it means that they have to come into being somehow, and the leader's role then shifts to get everyone participating in the conversation so that the business can rebirth itself as it literally speaks itself into being. The good news is that the leader no longer needs to be the wisest person in the room. He or she just needs to bring out the wisdom of others and work astutely and with great care to actively midwife the conversations. This requires an entirely new skill, drawing heavily on instinct and intuition. And honestly, it's not for the weak-kneed or those lacking in courage, because as you can imagine, these are difficult conversations, and sometimes you have to get into the trenches. It is not touchy, feely, soft stuff. This is the hardest job ever, and the really strong men I know are into this. I can't say this enough. These are not fun conversations all the time. They can be, but not always. They can be in-your-face conversations as well, and they don't happen easily in command and control environments. They require level playing fields. Unquestioned mental models can function as petulant dictators or totalitarian regimes. They work hard to censor and undermine the conversation, and when that happens, the conversation is forced underground and no one wins. We can't knock on the door and wait to be invited. We must step in, because silence is the greatest manifestation of censorship, and apathy and cynicism are the enemies of the imagination. They are conversations that needed to happen but never did. There is deep grief work here at times, retooling a workforce or rebuilding a community. So sometimes the conversations do need to get hijacked because there is no choice, and a steady state of grief defeats everyone's purpose. Hijacking a conversation means changing the conversation without asking for permission. Leaders need to prove themselves, and perhaps that's not such a bad thing because they have to work at it daily. And they're the ones who are leading us into the new conversations if we don't know what the new financially feasible, socially conscious hybrid business models will actually look like. We know we need them. And there is now a deep striving, meaning-seeking, down at the riverbank conversation that's starting to quicken and take hold. It's coming to life, and it begs to be heard. A theme that is also built into WASH is water. It makes sense, since water is so essential to life, and the human body is mostly water, and the brain alone is like 85%. We came out of the ocean, and we love to shower, we love to swim, we use water in all sorts of rituals, bathing, baptism, birthing, so on. I read something really interesting in the National Geographic one time, and I just can't get it out of my head. All the water that ever will be is. I mean, all the water that ever will be is. This is a sobering thought. You can live without oil. Well, I can't live without olive oil, but that's an entirely other story. But you cannot live. We cannot live without water. And so therefore, what are we going to do about it? It's everyone's problem. How will we ensure that our children, our world will have the water, the essential resources to do the wash? And what I mean by that is to live. The water solution and solutions for these big world in our backyard problems will not come out in isolated laboratories or in single stream inventions. Solitary eureka moment innovations. These solutions are out there in conversations waiting to happen, waiting to be born. The words are already incubating. They exist in tip-of-the-tongue enlivened discussions about mission, vision, values. And no, I am not talking about the laminated posters or outwardly focused credos. I am talking about the nitty-gritty real thing here, how conversations heat up and need to sometimes. Conversations between functional groups, vendors, suppliers, private, public partnerships. and in the hallway, at the water cooler, the boardroom, town hall, policy table conversations. These are important conversations that need to happen, and we need to build a better tolerance for heat so that we can manage through them. At the deepest level of intentionality, the very deepest level of intentionality, Greg, okay, WASH is really about our need to address and eradicate hatred and bias. Here is the embedded gift and a real opportunity. Conversation fosters intimacy, knowing and understanding. Our global workplace can actually help us break down bias and hatred. It can help us across that big divide. It's about getting everyone to the table. By putting us together and by driving conversations of deep meaning, we can break down those barriers, get to know each other in authentic ways, and create mind-shifting small world effects. Figure out once and for all that we truly are in this together. This is the #1 imperative of the 21st century. And the real promise inherent in this paradigm is to dissolve the divide. This is our call to arms. A different kind of arms, though, this time. The arms of abbracciamento, or collective embrace. Remember that the conversation as a living system depends on diversity. We are women, men, adults, children, Chinese, Italian, African, American, Russian, Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, brothers, sisters, aunts, cousins. The conversation is what makes us alive, and diversity makes the conversation. It keeps everything going as a species, and when the conversation fades, it goes away because there is not enough difference, and we don't respect each other and the difference. In 1880, Yick Wo versus Hopkins, the city of San Francisco passed an ordinance stating that all wooden laundries had to have permits. 95% of the laundries were wooden at the time, and although all of the Chinese owners applied, not one was given a permit, while all the non-Chinese were. This is part of our history. We still have a long way to go. Can't is not an answer. Go figure it out. Use your imagination. These are words my mother taught me. Today, in addition to my mother, the presentation was dedicated to Yick Wo. Thank you.